Hello and welcome to the Large and Unnecessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 40.
Another big 10.
Power of 10.
Feels like more. Well, I know technically it has been more, but
It has technically been more. How many more has it actually been?
I don't like to think. A couple of bonus episodes.
I think technically we're up to about 44 or something, but look, this is episode 40. That's what we're calling it, right? It's just a name.
Official canon.
Aye, just a name. We've got a board games episode in store for you, so we're going to tell you about some of the board games we've been playing, but also we're going to let Pawel talk about an RPG. He's been really happy and excited about it.
He's actually brought in some
He's brought a pretty hefty book.
photocopied or printed material.
Aye.
I'm very excited. There's a tear.
He hasn't printed out a PDF this time. It's really confusing. But yeah, that's a pretty hefty book. It looks nice. I have to say.
Yeah, well, we live in the age of nice-looking RPGs. Well, having said that, board games are quite pretty nowadays as well. So it's
Was this a Kickstarter?
Well, yes.
Yeah, that's why it looks nice. That's why it looks nice.
Yeah.
Kickstarter things do tend to look nice if they've done well.
Yeah. Thank you, Kickstarter.
But we'll get to your RPG later in the episode, so we're going to first start off by talking about the big thing, the one big thing in board gaming at the moment.
This is exactly what happens all the time. We'll do it later.
The bloody huge thing.
It's fucking massive, let's face it. It's I think probably the biggest box I've seen.
Well, in the time of Queen Games releasing all these big boxes, this is the biggest box.
This is definitely the biggest box.
Do you think you could raise a newborn in it?
Yeah, you probably could, actually.
You could
probably
put a newborn in it.
You could fit a child, a newly born child in there. I wouldn't.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, because I think there's a pretty tight seal on that once you get it closed.
Yeah,
I don't think you've got a lot of air's going to get in it.
Aye.
Unless you're willing to shred like a hole in the top of your own board game box, there's really...
I'm not really willing to do that.
No.
We probably shouldn't put children in that.
Yeah, let's put children out.
But thanks for... That was an important point, Pawel, so thanks for bringing that up.
That's safety.
So, this is... we're not even saying what we're talking about. We're talking about Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven.
That's why I thought about children.
Why? Because children bring you gloom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Noise and,
Aye.
everything. Yeah.
Like your neighbours.
Yeah.
But this is a haven for gloom.
Okay, yeah, so that's even worse. So we're talking about a proper...
Right. Let's actually talk about the game now. Like,
grimdark fantasy, yeah?
It's grimdark fantasy.
We like that.
This is...
Children getting slaughtered.
No, it's not about that. This is a legacy style game. So this is, I think, technically the first legacy style game that has had sort of big release sort of thing that has not been done by Rob Daviau. Because Rob Daviau, obviously, he did Pandemic Legacy, Risk Legacy, Seafall, all of those things. Now, this is by Isaac Childress, who also made Forge War, which is another game that, well, me and you and we fucking love that game.
That's a quality game. We've yet to bring it up on the podcast.
No, because we haven't played it for a while.
Yeah.
But we were going to break out the other night there and we didn't. But we will. We'll get to that because Isaac Childress, he's becoming one of my favourite designers. He's so good at these things. Like he's a machine. In fact, like just going by, because this is a Kickstarter game, going by his updates and Kickstarter and stuff. I don't know how this guy finds all the time to do all this stuff. And he sent out this box, which less than a year and a half after the Kickstarter ended. Because I checked it, I think it was the end of 2015 that Kickstarter ended.
That's quite impressive.
That's really impressive because this box is full of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's so heavy. It's the heaviest board game box I've ever picked up. It's the biggest board game box I've ever picked up. It's got miniatures in it. It's got all sorts of tokens. It's got hundreds, probably thousands of cards.
It's impressive to the point of being scary, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're assuming that this Isaac guy is pretty much a machine.
Yeah, he is a machine.
All right.
Big fan.
Good for you, Isaac.
You'd have thought at least some of the lore and everything of this has been maybe gestating for a while before he came to...
But
Because it's very rich so far. Well, I mean, we've not played a massive amount, but it seems like there is a bit of depth to it. In terms of, like...
I just think he's just one of these guys who has an idea and he goes with it.
Yeah.
And, like, he somehow manages to just... I don't know how he manages to do it, but he just somehow manages to just build a massive game around one thing. And this is clearly something that he's been working on for a while. I think he's had the idea and he said, I don't know how much work he'd done into it before the Kickstarter started, but, I mean... Like I say, a year and a half from the Kickstarter ending to that game turning up on my doorstep from China is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Like, now let's actually talk about what this is. Now this is just going to be first impressions because what we did was we opened the box, I had a read of the rule book, and then we just set up the first dungeon in it and we played through that. Because there is a campaign that you can play in this, and that's the idea of Gloomhaven, is that you play a legacy game basically where there's a map and there's different dungeons, and when you unlock dungeons you'll put stickers on the board to say that these dungeons are here and all that sort of thing, and you can go and do those quests which are in a big book of dungeons. Yeah. Now all we did was we set up the first dungeon and play through it. We had no intention of like keeping our characters or running the campaign. We just wanted to get a feel for how this game works, and I was impressed. I have to say, for a dungeon crawler, which, I mean, this is one of these things that blows my mind. The fact that he's made a pretty good dungeon crawling game, but also made it part of this huge fucking thing.
It is. It feels like it's like, okay, well, that's essentially what we played, but you know from what's going on with the game that like there's so much more to it, and that's just like one small aspect of it. It's because quite impressive.
Like how the game works. I mean, when you're in this dungeon crawl, there's 6 character classes that you can choose to play as when you open the game box and start playing. There's shitloads more character classes than that. I think there's 21 in total or something like that. There's something like that.
Didn't want to bring myself to count those boxes.
Yeah, there's a load of boxes in there and they're sealed and you can't use them until certain points in this campaign, this legacy thing that you're playing through.
Proper little wax seals on them. They're lovely.
They're nice. They're nice. So you pick one of these 6 classes, and it's quite cool because the boxes for the classes have just got a symbol on the front of them. So you don't know what's in the box until you open it up. So we just went, okay, I'll take that symbol. Yeah. And we ended up with a weird party. There was 3 of us playing. So we had the Iron Brute, who's basically like a sort of big...
Sort of a tanky
I still think
character.
You should be using the names for the classes you came up with.
Oh, yeah, for the symbols.
Yes.
So we had... What were they? So we had Mr. Cog,
Gearhead.
the psychiatrist, Gearhead, the psychiatrist.
Oh, yeah.
One was Anus, I think that's the Spellweaver, because it was just a sort of star thing that was on it.
Obviously.
Mr. Spikes.
Mr. Spikes. It was Windows 95.
Oh, Windows 95.
Which is my absolute favourite. Yes.
And Naruto. So if you can just picture the symbols there, whatever symbols come to your mind for those things, there you go. So yeah, we just picked one. So we ended up, we went to the psychiatrist, we went with Mr. Spikes and...
Mr. Gears.
Mr. Gears, Gearhead, whatever it was. Turns out that they're actually, what was it, the Mind Thief, the Iron Brute, and the Tinkerer, respectively. So... It was a bit of a weird mixture, but it's good that he's not gone for those classic character classes. Those like, this is a rogue, this is a fighter, this is a cleric, this is a wizard. He's gone for something a little bit different.
Well, even the races are slightly different.
Oh, the races are... I think the only one that's like... there's only one human in it, and the rest are all just made up things.
They're really odd races, and they feel different. You know, like, I mean, we've talked about on this before, but like the way that fantasy stuff can go. And if you try to do something different, it often... lends itself just like, you're basically just renaming the same. But these do feel really different in terms of like the look of the characters and the way you play them as well. Like I don't think I've played anything that matches the class that I was playing.
I mean, you could argue there's a lot of video games in particular that have something like yours. It's like an engineer style. You make bombs and you've got a flamethrower and stuff like that. But I mean, I was a Mind Thief. That was like an interesting one. So he's basically like a sort of almost psychic character, but he was a little rat man. He was only about like, I don't know, guessing about 2 or 3 feet tall, who was just running about controlling the minds of the enemies and making them attack each other, but putting out debuffs and stuff like that. Anyway, we need to actually explain how this the mechanics of this work. So what happens is each class has got a hand of cards. You get the entire hand of cards for level 1 character. So you take all the level 1 cards. That's your starting hand. On your turn, you can play 2 of them. Well, at the start of the round, even everybody plays 2 of them face down. And the cards are split into two halves, so you've got a top half and a bottom half, and they might have things on them like the top half might say like move 4, attack 2, something like that, and then the bottom half might have something a bit more interesting in it, or something like an area effect attack, or I don't know, turn yourself invisible or something like that. Now when you play those two cards, you can play one for the top half and one for the bottom half, and then you have to discard the cards when the round is over. Now that's quite important because you're constantly discarding cards out your hand, and once you run out of cards you have to rest to get your cards back, and there's two ways of doing that, but we'll not go into the details, but essentially you'll lose a card every time you do that, and that goes into a lost pile. Some of the cards as you play them also go into the lost pile, especially the more powerful ones like your flamethrower.
Well, aye, there was a couple there. Basically, you kind of want to be playing cards that there's a symbol that appears, and if you're using that action on the card, as soon as you use it, you've lost that card. So, yeah, you kind of want to be slightly tactical and like sort of using the ones that you can refresh first, even though you know you're maybe going to lose one when you do, so that you're keeping your more powerful cards. Because once you use, I had a couple where both actions, they were that powerful that both actions had a lose this card thing on them.
Yeah.
So if I used one, I was never going to get to use the other.
Yeah.
So I think everybody had maybe one or two of them. Yeah,
I think they'll carry. But what I've seen, because I've opened up the other boxes for the starting character classes, and they all seem to play a bit differently. Oh. So like the spellcraft or whatever his name is, what's his name? Kind of Spellweaver. The Spellweaver?
Yeah, something like that.
The Spellweaver. He's basically like the magic user. Mm-hmm. He's got a pretty cool thing, whereas he has a very small hand size. He's only got like 8 cards, but he's got a card that lets him recover all his lost cards, not just the discarded ones. He gets all his lost cards back as well.
Right.
So he's and he seems like a really sort of complicated class to play because he's manipulating magic all the time, and a lot of the cards combo with each other, so you have to play them in the right order and blah blah blah. But anyway, essentially you're using these action cards to move around this dungeon, which is set up in front of you. At the start of the thing, you already know what's in the dungeon, which is an interesting thing. Like, you've got the map in front of you, you already know what's in it, what monsters are in it, and everything like that. There's no surprises. Even the traps just go down on the floor, and you can just see where they are. It's like, but it's part of the game. It's just the way the game is.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would get round that actually, because there is no dungeon master in this game or anything. It's just you play against a sort of AI.
I think essentially what he's trying to do is put in a challenge where there can be and things like I mean, the stuff like the traps, it wasn't as if they were easy to disarm. I mean, we basically had to take I had to take the damage to go in to like get us through a door because it was just surrounded by traps and stuff like that, where you have to think a wee bit. It's more about how you play a dungeon, and it's not, and like you say, everything is dictated by these cards.
Yeah,
there's no I have to worry about how much movement I have, or it's like it's there on the cards, and it's how you, and obviously they are tailored to each class and character, so it's how you sort of manipulate that as
Now each of the dungeons, they've got their own winning conditions, but the one that we played was just to kill everything in the dungeon. Now when it comes to like the enemies' turns, all the enemies, like all the different types of enemies all have their own decks. And there's shitloads of enemies in this game, so the decks just tell you just draw a random card from that deck, and just that tells you what that type of enemy does. So if you've got an archer, if you've got a bunch of archers in a room, you draw from the archer deck, and that will say like they'll move 2 and fire with a range of 4 or something like that. And then you just do what those cards tell you to do. So it's all pretty automated, but it's random as well. So what's good about this, what I enjoy about it, and what's like better than things like Descent and stuff like that, is the fact that it's completely unpredictable. Even though you can see the layout of the dungeon, you don't know what the enemies are going to do in their turn, because they might do nothing, but then again they might come and like hit you with everything that they've got. So you've got to like just take that into account when you're making your plans and stuff like that.
The one thing I forgot to mention earlier there about the cards, so I probably distracted you from it, was the initiative thing.
Oh yeah,
did we mention that? Just that essentially kind of like adds that extra layer of randomness as well. It
does, because like the action cards all have an initiative number on them, and basically you get to decide which of the 2 cards you play is the initiative number you're using, and it's the lowest number goes first. But yeah, that does add into the sort of tactics of the game and stuff like that.
Okay, I think that actually explains why this game is so massive, because previously when I looked at the box and at the list of contents, I was shocked not only by the size of the box, but also by the sheer numbers. If you normally pick up a board game, you get, 95 cards of this type, and you think that's actually a lot, whereas this game lists 400 cards of this type and 350 cards of that type, and it's wow.
It does add to the game, like having that many things, because it does make the game much more random. Like the behaviour of the enemies much more random and stuff
factor
like that.
That you've mentioned. If you've got so varied enemies and all of them unique decks with each card doing a thing that you don't expect or aren't used to, then essentially you've got almost a randomized engine against yourself, which is brilliant because you can't just hack the game.
Right, okay, well, I don't want to go on about Gloomhaven for the next, 50 minutes, because we probably could, right? So, we're going to actually start a campaign of this, and we'll come back to it, and we'll gush more about it later. A couple of things that I will say about it is that, it is a legacy game, but it's non-destructive, which means, unlike the sort of Rob Davio-style legacy games where, you're tearing cards up when they're out of the game and stuff like that, and you don't get to use them ever again. This Gloomhaven one has a sort of system where you can have multiple people playing in the same, on the same board and stuff like that at different times. So it's almost like a
shared universe.
Game. Yeah, shared universe. So people are unlocking dungeons, because you can unlock random dungeons and stuff like that. And then if you've got a different party that are playing on a different night, they can go to that dungeon because it's now on the map.
Okay.
So you can do stuff like that with it. It's pretty cool. I actually like the way that he's kind of worked that out. It also has stuff that's as if that wasn't enough. There's a random dungeon generator in it, and there's a couple. I think one of the other important things is the fact that the players aren't allowed to tell each other what they're doing as well. When it comes to planning your turns, you're not allowed to be specific, so that adds another sort of element of randomness into the game. Where you're not allowed. You're allowed to say things like, "I'm going to go and attack this guy," but you're not allowed to say, "I'm going to move up to this guy and smack him in the face for exactly 3 damage" or something like that.
That's the thing.
You're not allowed to do those kind of things in this game, so I quite like that.
Yeah. Well, because you're discussing tactics, but you're not
specific.
You're not metagaming. You're not saying this is you're not testing the parameters of the game. You're actually immersing yourself in.
That's it.
That's good. Let's put some RPG in it.
Yeah.
It is essentially just like an RPG in a box, isn't it? It's like full RPG campaign in a box without the acting. But right, we're going to have to move on though. So that's Gloomhaven. We'll come back to that once we get our campaign started, hopefully soon.
Plenty more to say.
That's designed by Isaac Childress, and his company produced it, Cephalosphere Games. So moving on, we're going to talk about a game which. It's a Civilization game. It came out a few years ago now, actually. It's maybe 3 or 4 years old now.
I don't know. This is one that we've been trying to play for some time, and it sort of keeps getting knocked to the bottom of the pile. And
this is the first time you played it,
It's the first time I played it.
Yeah, because I've played it a couple of times before that.
Yeah. Well, this is Patchwork History.
No, it's called Patch History.
Patch History. I keep wanting to call it Patchwork History.
Why is it called that?
There is another board game called Patchwork, though. So
that's maybe it. But I don't
you guys keep mentioning it, and I keep thinking about Ragdian or something like this.
Well, it's called Patch History because the main kind of it's a civilization building game, and a big part of it is you start off with. It's always 6 squares, essentially. I don't think there's
your starting point is always
boards.
6 squares.
There is different things, we played it. You can have it either set up so that all the starting boards are the same, so they all have, one of each building, so everybody starts with the same stuff, or you can have, as Chris likes to have, some asymmetric starting civilizations. And then, so you'll maybe not have certain technologies start with, other people will. And what you're doing as you go through the game is you're taking new tiles that go over your original card, and you're building a patchwork of, and you'll occasionally cover over things that you had been using to bring in new things. It's a really interesting mechanic in terms of.
It is really weird though. Because I often, when I play this game, I find myself sitting thinking, who came up with this idea for making a patchwork civilization?
I don't know, but again, I'm thinking and again, we're just talking about Gloomhaven and some of the ways that things are worked out there. I just think there's a lot of people who make board game with very slidey thinking, very kind of just. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but certain logic things that I just can't follow. But yeah, essentially you play 3 ages. There's a sort of prehistoric, or not prehistoric, but a kind of Bronze Age, and then building up to a sort of future
then medieval
age.
and then modern, pretty much.
Yeah. And yeah, each of you play each round. There's 5 rounds in each age, and you'll play through each round in a set of the usual sort of Euro game style breakdown of things. So I'll go through that as they become relevant. But yeah, I mean the buildings you kind of start with the basic buildings. You start off with basically give you resources that you'll need to get your civilization going, and so you've got your basic things. So politics would give you essentially you get votes, which come
they give you political points,
political influence.
Yeah.
Economy gives you income. Military gives you military might, and cultural buildings give you cultural points when you're sort of income collection phase. And then you've got industry giving you food, which as usual in these kind of games you need to feed your folk at the end of it.
Gotta feed your people.
Right. And transport, which is an odd... It's the other thing.
Yeah,
in this game.
Transport is the weird resource in this game,
Yeah.
as far as but it does help with military and it helps with trading things when you build trade routes. But it also helps for moving your workers around in your civilization.
Well, yeah, they have.
It is a weird resource, but that's what it
But
is.
that's the thing. I mean, transport is a bigger thing in this game than you might realise, because they've instituted another interesting mechanic in this that kind of simulates. Essentially, because you have your own, each of you has your own wee player board, and you're patching that up as you go. But you also have these trade routes, and you start off with a sort of a clockwise kind of trade route going. I mean, we did play it before players, didn't we? And it was, so you had one going from one player, and then for the player that's going to another. So you have these in between each of you, and you can build new ones. And when you form alliances, you get new sort of trade routes forming between you. The basic trade routes, you'll pass along them. You'll have a counter, and your movement will tell you how your transport will tell you how many spaces you can move along. You don't have to move the full one. You can move. What we found ourselves just going one each time, because it's like, well, I might as well take these resources. Once you get to the end of it, though, you then have to negotiate with the player whose board you've reached, and that brings in another strange thing where you both do essentially a bid for whether or not you're going to go to war.
Well, it's not really a bid. It's a secret. It's a secret thing whether you want to fight or you want to be friends. I wouldn't call that a bid.
Because it's
you're not like saying I've got more money than you. So.
Yeah, there's no like competitive element as far as that
goes. It's nothing to do with resources.
It's just that you get a lot of these kind of blind.
It's a choice,
blind bid sort of thing, or blind auction sort of things in these games, and you kind of essentially you both get a tile with a red side and a blue side. The blue side being peace, the red side being fighting. And if you both go blue, it's fine. You set up an alliance. You get a wee trade route. If one of you goes blue, one of you goes red, one of you is considered to be defending, the other one's attacking. And if you both go red, you're both just swedging. You're both just getting stuck into each other. And combat rules will differ depending on how that works. But essentially, it's a one round. Essentially, combat or war happens in one of the stages of your round. I think it's in the middle of the turnover. If I go through it anyway, so yeah, going through all of the phases of the round, you start off with an auction for your new terrain tiles, which you're going to patch onto your civilization. This works in an odd way, so where everybody is going to come away with a tile at the end of it. So you do that by you put down your however many coins. Generally, you're going to start with one, maybe, and then the next person either they put it on a card.
They put that on the tile specifically.
You put it on the tile.
The tile that you want, you put your money on.
So the next person is either going to try and outbid you on that tile, or they'll just go for one of the other ones that's free. Yeah. So when it gets to... Now, you might have a round where everybody just goes for a different thing, and they'll just take a tile. If somebody tries to outbid you on one, you then get shunted on to another tile, or you can try and match or, outbid them. If you can't outbid them, you're going to go for another tile. What can then happen is you can go on to somebody else's tile where they're going for... And this happened a few times of basically people getting shunted to the bottom of the order, essentially.
Yeah, aye. It becomes a pretty weird thing where you're basically people are just moving amounts of money around on these tiles and just annoying each other because, like, if you've got like 3 coins on something and somebody puts 4 coins on something, you can move your 3 coins onto somebody else's tile and they've only got 1 coin on it. Then that person has to move their 1 coin or put more money on, and you just end up with a pile of money just moving around these tiles for ages until everybody is happy.
It's such a strange thing. You don't
It's
expect
a weird auction system, but I like it. I think
I do
it
like
works.
No, it sounds entertaining. I'm not sure how it works thematically, because it's not something you expect in a game like this.
Without going into there is like the way that the mechanics of the auction thing is set up. There is a finite end to it. So basically, once everybody ends up independently on a different card, it's that right. It's over. You're not going to start. You can't just keep chucking more money in, basically. So it does. It does end at a reasonable point. It doesn't get too stupid, but it is. Yeah, it's entertaining as it is. So yeah, once you've done that, you have to then place your terrain tiles into your civilization, which can be a bit of a headache. And as the game goes on, it becomes a wee bit difficult.
It does become difficult because you're limited by the amount of space that you have. So you've got your your 2x3 home tile, which has got your 6 spaces basically. But when you get a new tile, you have to either patch one of the spaces on that tile either over or under one of the tiles you already have in front of you.
Yeah.
So that becomes annoying because then there'll be something on one of those tiles that you're going to lose. Or it could be 2 spaces even, because if you get like one of the leaders or the wonders or something, or one of the big buildings, the special buildings I think they're called, which take up 2 spaces or something, you end up losing more space in your civilization for things as you start trying to expand it. You're losing out on things but gaining other things. But you're also limited by the size of your civilization. It can't be more than 5x5 in the first era, 6x6 in the second, 7x7 in the third. So when you're auctioning for these tiles, you've really got to think about where you can fit this tile in. There's no point in going for a tile that you can't actually fit into your civilization anywhere without losing stuff.
That's the thing, and you can end up in a situation where you're just going to have to pick up a tile that you're going to have to fit it in somewhere. Like, you have no choice.
Yep.
You're going to potentially. So it's up at that point you're minimising your losses as best you can.
And like you say, it becomes more difficult as the game goes on, and your civilization's getting a bit weird.
Well, as you were saying about the buildings and the great people, the special buildings, all that stuff, they can take up multiple spaces, and you have to patch over like a particular building or space. Like, so the basic buildings are one space, so they're quite easy to patch over. If something's 2 spaces, you have to find something that you have to fully patch. You can't leave half of that sticking out. So it becomes harder to get rid of some of those things. So after that, you have your diplomacy and management. So that's where your sort of
city actions
and things like that.
And that's where your political points come in hand, because basically, if you've got political buildings, they produce in political points. You spend your political points in that stage in the game.
They allow you to
take
take a certain amount of actions. Any actions you don't take, they're turned into votes, which come in at the end of the round.
Yeah.
After that, you got your movement. So that's again your trade routes,
score,
and then negotiation and war, because that obviously follows on from your deciding whether or not you're going to go to war. And then after that, it's production, worker maintenance. So,
well, that's the thing that happens at the end of every round, end of every era.
Yeah.
So you only do the 5 phases for the first 4 rounds of each era, and then you do 7 phases in the last round of each era, which is the feeding your people. And what's the other thing? Maintaining your wonders and stuff like that. So you have to pay resources for your wonders and things. Now, one of the things that we didn't actually say is that you've got a player board in front of you. Which marks all your resources and your income and stuff like that. So anytime you get a new type of building, you're putting that up, and then when you do your production and stuff like that, you'll be getting these tokens, these food tokens, these resource tokens, the money, all these things. And stuff like your transport score and your military score is just marked on that board. You don't actually get tokens or anything for it.
It does help you keep track of things as you're going, because it can be really help,
because there's 8 things that you need to keep track of.
Yeah.
And it's annoying having to recount it all the time. So it's much easier.
And it's quite nicely split up. I like to say 4 of them are things that you're actually receiving as income, and the others are essentially your power level in that particular thing.
Given that this game differs so much from your traditional civilization building games, is it difficult to actually learn? Because it sounds a bit complicated.
I think, because I was trying to teach it, and I think it's merely just different elements of it that you have to try and get your head around, especially the patchwork thing. That's like one of the more sort of complicated things, and that people are like, what? you're doing what?
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
But yeah, it does work. I think it's one of these games that once you play a couple of rounds, that you're like, all right, okay, fair enough. I understand what's going on now.
Okay.
It reminds me a bit. It's like, especially with the little player board and stuff. Like Through the Ages, it's one of the things I compared it to.
Okay.
It's not similar to it, but
No.
it kind of scratched the same itch, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I think all these games, like, they'll use different mechanics, but you always get the same kind of feeling from them in terms of building up a civilization and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's no matter how you achieve it, basically. So I mean, that's most of the main, because it's the interesting mechanics that are sort of interesting to describe about this game.
I agree with you.
I wasn't actually expecting to be as heavy. It's not. I'm just not super heavy, but like it was one that kept you thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most of that, though, was the brain burning trying to figure out which tiles you're going to have try and get into your civilization. Because, the games has a subtitle, like a subheading, and it's called The History of Sacrifice. All right.
And that is a major...
And it is a major part of this game, because when you're patching things into your civilization, you are having to give something up, generally most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's like that was what I found about this game, was that it was trying to make those decisions about what you need to give up and when.
I think that's it though. With this game, they've kind of tried to build in some of the elements of unpredictability that you wouldn't necessarily have. Like, it's not that just sort of slow building up to a certain thing, and you can always see what's going on. It does sort of throw the whole patchwork thing. Really does kind of throw some odd situations on in your play.
Oh yeah. And we should have said, this is a points game. You win by culture points, I think it is. So if you've got culture buildings, you're producing culture points all the time.
Yeah. Although I saying that, I think I was producing the most culture each turn, but I don't think I didn't end up winning that game.
No, I did. But I was getting ridiculous bonuses for things, because it's not the only way you're getting culture. You get culture through winning wars. I think you got. Did you not get a bit?
I did get a bit of culture.
You get a bit from destroying somebody. Yeah. But I got culture from various other places, like certain wonders and leaders I think were producing culture based on certain things. But I also took one of the Aztec leaders, I think it was, at one point in the game, which basically it was a complete bastard move, because it basically forced me, I gave up a certain amount of workers, basically killed them.
Yeah.
Alright, put them back in, but everybody else had to give up the same amount of workers as well. Basically, I sacrificed a whole load of people with my Aztec leader.
That sounds
and
dramatic.
I gained so much culture for doing it.
Well, I'm not sure if this is how it worked originally in the...
But that was how I ended up winning the game. It was that one move that won the game for me.
I think as well, with the thing you were saying there about the war, and why transport's important as well, and this became important to me at the end of the game, where I just, by sheer chance, had quite a high quite a lot higher than some of the other... that somebody did an aggressive move to me, and I was like, well, I've got resources, I'm just going to set up a wee trade route and zip right to the end of it. There was nothing and you can while your military strength's high, if you're transporting your military strength, you can just hit people hard in ways that you can't really quite do that in some other games. I don't think it's not quite as direct and aggressive in a lot, especially in Through the Ages, which is bizarre in the way it does. It
is weird, but Through the Ages is one of the most abstract civilization games I've ever played. I think this one is less abstract, but it does have abstract things to it.
Yeah.
But I think it feels more like you're actually building a civilization rather than playing a thinky Euro strategy game like Through the Ages is. Which is still, I really enjoy Through the Ages, a really bloody good game, but that is basically what it is. Anyway... we need to wrap this one up as well. So that's Patch History, Euan, which I believe is the Korean designers.
It is. It's by Jun-hyuk Kim and Yeon Min Jung.
Okay. Good mates of yours?
I always pal around with the Korean lads. We go down for kimchi and barbecue.
Right, so that's Patch History. Okay, so we are going to move on. I want to quickly talk about a game that I played with one of your friends the other night. He brought it round. I think he'd only recently picked it up. It's called Hanami Koji. So it's a Japanese game.
Let's translate.
What's that?
Let's translate it.
Let's translate it. You're the expert.
Well, Hanami's viewing flowers, like when the blossoms come out of the sakura. You go for a Hanami. You go for a wee wander.
Do you quite often go for a Hanami?
I went for a Hanami once in a public bathroom.
Right. So that, Hanami Koji, it came out in 2013, but I believe that was probably the original Japanese version or whatever, so I don't know when the English version came out. I tried to find that out quickly, but I couldn't.
Okay.
This is designed by Kota Nakayama.
Let's not translate that.
It's just somebody's name. Now this
Middle
is
of the mountain, if you must know.
right. How many sort of two-player games that were designed solely for two players have you played that you've found are quite actually deep in terms of their strategies? And I'm like, I mean, we've got things like Twilight Struggle, but let's think about the lighter ones.
Okay.
Netrunner.
So,
Well,
Android
If
Netrunner.
I'm talking the ones that I've
well-
played with yourself, like, I mean, I'm going back to some of the card games, like Jambo and
Jambo, yeah.
Lost Cities,
Lost
which
Cities,
I well started
but Lost
playing.
Cities is very light.
Aye.
Jambo's
a bit more. Jambo's got a bit more going on.
yeah, and Jambo's a bit more sort of take that with each other as well. There's a lot of just trying to screw each other over in Jambo. This is really elegant and streamlined. It's got 21 cards in it. So you know, like Love Letter, how that is another Japanese game,
Yeah.
which is just so streamlined. I think that's maybe only got 21 cards as well. It's around about that number,
yes,
right?
small.
So but that's a really small amount of cards, all right, and that's it. That's what you play this game with.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's other things there, but they're more there just for markers and stuff. What you're actually playing the game with is just these 21 cards. So what is you've got 7 geishas. Okay, so you've got 7 geishas. Now, the artwork in this game, by the way, is beautiful. It's really colourful. It's really nice. I would say that the sort of artwork, it's almost like they've gone for something that's almost like between manga and Disney princess in terms of the geishas. It's almost like they've hit that somewhere in the middle.
That's a thing. Maybe I didn't get a good because when I was looking at the box art and the kind of just looking at the cards you were playing, it kind of just reminded me like sort of classic Japanese art when you see
but the
these
closer
kind
I
of,
looked at it, it had more of a, I don't know, like
slightly cartoony.
But sort of slightly less manga-esque and slightly more, especially the faces I was finding. Anyway, that's all by the by. So the artwork's really nice. So you've got 7 geishas. Now the geishas are numbered.
Yeah.
They've got there's a number 5, a number 4, there's 2 number 3s and 3 number 2s. Okay. Now if you count them up, that counts up to 21. So there's 21 cards in the game. So there's 5 cards for the number 5 geisha, there's 4 cards for the number 4 geisha, and so on. Alright?
Okay.
So the geishas all have cards associated with them. Now the object of this game is to earn the favour of 4 geishas or 11 points worth of geishas. So the numbers that are on the geishas is points as well. Now, that may sound slightly confusing, but
Can I just ask, is this one of those games where you could take the theme and essentially out of the game and put some other theme in and it would work?
you probably could, but I wouldn't do that,
Okay.
right? Let's just leave that there.
Let's earn favor of a number of
Well,
geishas.
it's quite nice. So tying back into the artwork, the geishas, so the number, let's say one of the number 2 geishas it's a geisha holding a scroll. Okay, so the 2 cards associated with her are a scroll. All right, so it's items that the geishas have that are on their cards, basically. And all you're really doing is you start the game with 6 cards, and on your turn you pick up a card, and then you have to use one of 4 actions. All right, so you've got 4 action tiles each. When you use one of those actions, you flip the action tile over to say, I've used that action, you can't use it for the rest of the game. So you've got 6 cards in your hand, you pick up another one, you've got 7. Now, the 4 actions, you can bin 2 cards from the game. Alright, they will not get scored at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. You can keep 1 card, which will get scored, so you keep it for yourself, and you put it face down on the table. You can put 3 cards up for offer. Alright, so you put 3 cards face up on the table. Your opponent gets to choose one of them, and you get the other 2. Alright, okay. And they get scored. So they don't go into your hand or anything, they just get put aside. Right. Or you can put 4 cards down in front of you, and then your opponent chooses 2 of them, and you get the other 2. Now, those are the 4 actions. You have to use all 4 actions in each round. Okay. That's why the game is surprisingly deep. Okay, because if you start the game with 6 cards in your hand, you pick up another one, you've got 7. You then use that action, which puts 4 cards face up, and then your opponent chooses 2, and you get the other 2. You've only got 3 cards left in your hand at that point. And you've still got 3 actions left to take. So when it comes back around to your turn again, you take another card, you've then got 4 cards in your hand. But the options that you've got left are to bin 2 cards, keep 1 for yourself, or put 3 up for offer and your opponent gets 1. So if you put the 3 up for offer, you've only got 1 card left in your hand. And then it comes back into your turn, you take another card.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then you've got your 2 actions left are to bin 2 cards, the 2 you've got in your hand, or to keep one of them. And then you're only going to get one more turn after that. So it's you're basically using up the entire deck, alright? And you're going to be scoring for some cards, and like I say, there'll be 2 cards that each player will put aside. The other thing is that at the beginning of the game, just like in Love Letter, one of the cards gets binned. So you don't know one of the cards is missing from the game. So, and that makes the game interesting.
Okay.
Now, what you actually do when you score them is you just lay the cards out and you see which cards you've got. So if you've got 3 cards for the number 5 geisha and your opponent's got 2 cards for the number 5 geisha, you get the favour of that geisha.
Right.
All right. And that's how you score. So you just basically lay them all out in front of the geishas that you've got the cards for. And then whoever's got the most cards wins the favour of that geisha.
And scores with the geisha.
And scores with the geisha. Aye. Now, if somebody, once all the cards are laid out, if somebody has got 4 geishas, they'll win the game. But also, like I say, you can win the game by getting 11 points. So it's possible for somebody to have 4 geishas, but somebody else to have 11 points.
That's what I was wanting to ask. Is what does
11
one
points
trump the other?
trumps the other.
Right.
Okay? So if you can get 11 points worth, that's always better than getting 4 geishas.
Ah, right.
Which is an interesting twist as
In
well.
in my head, I was thinking like 4 geishas. Like this thing is difficult to sort of visualize how this game all coming. You're telling me all this stuff, but like in my head, I was thinking 4 geishas would be the trump one.
Well,
we're not allowed to use the trump word anymore.
Just to recap.
What happened? What's going to happen to top trumps?
I'm now thinking about President Top Trumps. I'm just
No.
Right. Anyway, so just to recap about this game. So basically, what you're doing is you've got a bunch of cards in your hand that correspond with the geishas on the table. You're using the actions to try and get the cards that you want to try and score some of these geishas, and it's quite tactical. It's quite deep. One of the things is, right, it is possible for the game to end with nobody winning it.
Yeah.
All right. If that happens, you leave all the favour things. So you've got these little markers on each of the geisha, and you put it to your side if you've got the favour of that geisha, right? So you will leave them. If you've won the favour of that geisha in one round, you'll leave it on your side, and then you play another round. That changes the game completely, because all you need to do to keep that geisha is to tie. You don't have to win that geisha anymore.
Right.
So it does change the game completely, because then if you've got 3 geishas that are like already on your side when the game starts, that's different from them being in the middle, because now you only need to tie that geisha. You don't have to try and win it.
So you can tactically attempt not to win it, but rather just
and try and win in the next round instead by
prime yourself for a win.
Yeah,
okay, that's
putting
cool.
yourself in a position. So I mean, it's a 2-player game that has a lot of depth to it. When Dave was explaining it to me, I was just like, oh, it sounded like a game that had too many rules for what it was, and then I realised actually no. This is like they've really streamlined this game. This is really like Love Letter. They've really figured out exactly like the minimum amount of stuff that you need to make this game good.
See, I think it probably is quite well themed. It seems like this in kind of Love Letter, there's a certain, like, I don't know, evoking a sort of like Japanese like feudal kind of rivalries and machinations and things like that you're kind of, everything's sort of like, you're slightly secretive, but you're trying to gain sort of favour over like the other members of the court or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you're involved in. Yeah.
But I mean, I like this game because it's the kind of 2-player game I've been looking for. Because I've got like you say, I've got Jambo and I've got Lost Cities and I've got Twilight Struggle. I don't have anything that's sort of a lighter game, but that has like some sort of depth to it and actual decisions to make. Because a lot of the decision making in this game is just like, okay, I've got these cards in my hand. Which ones am I willing to give up? Which ones can I try and bluff that I don't want? Because if you're going to have to use like that action that puts the 4 cards down, and your opponent's going to get 2 of them, you have to use it every round. Or you have no choice. So you have to try and think strategically about, okay, looking at the setup on the table as it is so far, what cards has he got that I know of, sort of thing. What can I offer him so that I get the 2 cards I want, and he takes 2 ones that I want him to have, basically. And there's a lot of just like weird moments like that in this game that I actually really enjoyed. It fried my brain a few times, but yeah,
yeah,
for a 2-player game, surprisingly deep, and I really enjoyed it. Okay, so that was Hanami Koji. Oh yeah, I did say the designer. It was Kota Nakayama. But it was published by God knows how many different games companies. Emperor S4 Games was, I think, the edition that we played. So there you go. And shall we move on to an RPG now then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Harvest
so
time has come.
finally, Pavel, you're going to tell us about an RPG that you've been champing at the bit to tell us about for the past 2 months, I think.
Well, the truth is, I've got 15 different RPGs to talk about. This is just one of them, really. But yeah, I brought it with me just because I couldn't really remember everything properly. And I'll try to be brief because why not? Let's.
Because we're trying to keep the episode short.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Trying to fit all this into an hour.
I like a nice challenge. Right, let's go for it. This RPG is called. God, I'm so happy now. I'm actually talking about RPGs. This is brilliant. It only took us 30 episodes to reach this place.
And you have a massive book in your hand.
It's that's always a good feeling as well. This
You're like some sort of preacher.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Right, brothers and sisters,
RPG
let's talk about
evangelist.
RPG now. This one's called Coriolis: The Third Horizon, and it's made by our friends the Swedes. In this particular case, the Free League is the company. Thank you very much, Free League. It was also a Kickstarter, which I should probably add was actually very well made, because it was a proper Kickstarter that actually released its book with pretty much almost no delay at all, which is so rare nowadays. So thank you very much, our friends Swedes. Now, Coriolis is a, I'm going to say, Middle East themed retro science fiction, as odd as it sounds.
Very specific.
Yes, but this is actually a part of its charm, or probably its main charm, because nowadays everybody, you can't just make another AD&D clone, because everybody's just played Elves and Dwarfs and probably got bored with it 20 years ago. So if you want to come up with something new, you actually have to scratch your brain a bit. And the reason why this caught my eye is, if you think about your fantasy settings or your science fiction settings, you always pretty much just get your white people doing whatever white people do in any generic setting, because this is the way we learned to think about it.
Genocide, is that one of them?
They like a bit of that.
Aye.
Yeah, I suppose.
Colonialism.
Well, yes, that's the thing as well. Yeah. So you get no matter which fantasy setting you really pick up, you get your slightly transformed medieval German or slightly transformed medieval Englishman beating orcs to death, and science fiction.
Genocide.
Well, yes. and science fiction is probably similar in the way that no matter what you get, planets or star systems or starships or whatever empires might be named differently, but they all have a similar flavor, either aesthetically or ethically or ethnically. Coriolis is just different because it states from the very beginning, this is not what you're used to. Just think about Middle East in space. You may get, I don't know, inspired to play this game because you've watched Firefly, which is another good example of a game or setting that's not exactly standard, because this is essentially a western in space.
Firefly, that's the universe, right, where everybody's in space speaking Chinese and using Chinese products, yet you not once see an Asian person in the entire series.
Pretty much.
Right, that'll be that one.
That's the one, yes. Right, so in case of Coriolis, that's your Arabian Nights in space. And I think they've kept it pretty neat through the whole game, without even once referencing Western civilization as such. All your roles, all the factions in the game are Middle East themed. You've got your spices, you've got your shakes, you've got your data gin as your you would have various, I don't know.
Is that Jin as in genie?
Yeah.
Aye.
So you'd have your space wizards, you'd have your hackers, you would have your various mechanical geniuses in the Western science fiction RPG. So in here you're going to have a data Jin. And, various other...
I think I prefer that idea, actually.
flavors like this, and there's loads of them here. The whole setting is based on the fact that, at some point after colonizing as much space as human civilization could have had, which was, I think, the second horizon, the first horizon being obviously just Earth and its horizons around, civilization went on by sending 2 massive colonization ships out. One of them gets lost, another one after hundreds of years, thousands of years maybe, and civilization progressing on board of that ship finally arrives in a bit of space, attempts to colonize it, but realizes that humans have actually settled there because by the time once you've shipped and started your thousands of years worth of voyage, humans have actually found portals elsewhere and have managed to jump in here. So we've got various factions differently developed and obviously fighting with each other. Right, sorry. Let's just quickly mention why this RPG is maybe slightly unique, and obviously the theme or the setting is one of those things. Another one is probably mechanics, with attributes and skills being what you expect from an RPG. But I think nowadays game makers begin to realize that they should probably be forcing or attempt to encourage players and game masters to maybe go a little bit deeper when it comes to creating characters, but also creating tension or various obstacles along the way as you play. Because one of the themes in the game is mysticism and religion, this being a Middle Eastern game. There's no Allah here. Instead, there's icons, which is pretty much a collection of, 13 different deities, I think. And most, if not all, citizens of these, couple of dozens of star systems are quite religious. So as a player character, or as a gamer, as a player playing this game, you pray to your icon or various icons quite often, which is part of the mechanics as well. In this game, you pretty much just roll as many dice as your attribute plus skill relevant to the action you have, and then the dice you roll are d6s, and then every actual 6 is your success, and you count the number of successes. If you need to re-roll, that's your prayer to the icons. So you get to pray to your gods pretty much just so that your actual actions succeed or not. And the mechanic here is that every boon you get from the gods must find balance in the universe. So that's pretty much the game master accumulating some sort of dark tokens, which the players can see because the player characters are, to some extent at least, superstitious. So at some point you see this game master sitting on the other side of the table with a big bunch of dark tokens, and you know that the game master is supposed to spend these tokens to affect the situation in a negative way, which I find an interesting mechanic, even though, as far as I see things, Game Master is always welcome to do whatever he or she pleases, but oh well.
The totalitarian rule of Pawel the Games Master.
Oh, absolutely. But, I shouldn't really be talking about RPG in general here, so I'm just going to say Coriolis as such, mechanics as default as they are at least attempting to be thematic and praying to the icons and the dark points, and the Game Master pretty much kicking your butt if you've been using your supernatural powers or being too religious and things like this. The Game Master will at some point balance things out and kick your butt harder.
I find that quite interesting. So that's like giving the Games Master almost an incentive and an excuse.
Oh yes,
to just
the game
throw
master,
something in
as much as the game
stale.
master should be just in any role-playing session. That pile of Dark Between the Stars or something, but basically that pile of tokens is justification for the game master to be crueler than he would probably otherwise be, which is the reason why players should worry. Which is I'm gonna say, a mechanic that causes players to actually feel superstitious, which is pretty cool.
That's sad, yeah. That's right.
In a game that is otherwise, science fiction, but it is science fiction. But as I said, it's a retro science fiction. You see it in the art of the game. You see it in the design of the spaceships. It's got this. It's even difficult to compare. It's got the art style in general is top notch, well done there. But it's got its own flair, I'm gonna say. But yeah, other than that, you're supposed to just pick up your Arabian Nights. You're supposed to pick up your Scheherazade and whatever other classical Middle East tales, and port them in science fiction. This is how this game is supposed to work.
Oh, right.
And there is so much inspiration out there that RPGs don't ever even use.
So we're talking like Middle Eastern style sort of,
We're talking
like
about
folk tales
Sinbad.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
moving them into a sci-fi setting essentially is what you're getting
Yes,
at.
absolutely.
Yeah. That sounds really cool actually. That does sound pretty interesting.
That's like,
a
'cause
nice
that's
setting.
kind of I always sort of looked at like something like Dune as having shades of that, but then it never really comes off any
Nah.
time it's been like it was adapted or anything like that. But I always got the impression it was always rich, like taken from history and stuff like that.
Well, Sting's the least Middle Eastern looking man.
As much as he wants to be, with his desert rose.
Oh, come on! You're talking about sanctity here. If we're talking about David Lynch's Dune, we have to at least have some sort of...
Okay. Before this gets out of
Reverence.
hand, we have to stop this now, alright?
Right.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
anything else to add out, Coriolis?
Well done. Please keep them coming.
Thank you very much. So that's Coriolis by... Who was that again?
Free League. Our
League.
friends this week.
Excellent. Good stuff. That does sound quite cool. Right, that's episode 40. That's another efficient episode in the bag.
Just rattle through everything.
Rattling through
in the
that.
most perfunctory manner possible.
This new format is stressful.
Just
We
work
can't
from
just go at a
stress.
leisurely pace anymore. Right, we'll give out our internet. So if you want to email us, that's firstplayertoken@gmail.com. That's FIRST, player token, all one word. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Those are all FIRST player token, except for Twitter, which is 1ST player token.
Well, that's once player token.
Thank you, Euan.
Look at his book.
I know, I saw you. Our website is firstplayertoken.com. We have a Discord if you want to ask us for that. I will send you the link personally. And my Twitch username is Unnecessary Chris. I finished playing Orwell last night actually, so that video will be up on YouTube. But if you want to watch me playing games live, it's Unnecessary Chris on Twitch. And we are part of the Podnose Network.
The UK's leading entertainment podcast network.
Oh, you've been working on your radio voice.
Yes. hopefully Audacity's picking that up. Honey in my voice there. Yes, but we are proud to be a member of that community, and
Long may it continue.
If you like us, then check out some of the podcasts on there. They're top quality.
Thank you. So that was episode 40. We will be back next week with our video games episode, which will be called episode 41.
Really?
It will be.
It's not going to get a special title, is it?
It'll be called episode 41, episode 41.
That's a beautiful title.
Right. Okay, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye!